Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar with Birdeye, Word of Mouth in the Digital Age, Build Awareness and Supercharge Conversion. My name is Lizzie Roth, and I'm a Senior Account Manager for Localogy, and I will be your host for today's event. A few housekeeping items before we begin. The webinar is being recorded and will be circulated to all attendees with the presentation within 24 hours of the broadcast. Questions will be answered during the Q&A session at the end. You can, however, ask questions at any time during the broadcast by using the question window in your control panel. We are joined by our senior analyst from Localogy, Charles Laughlin. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Charles to introduce our speaker for today.
Thanks, Lizzie, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Excited to introduce Travis Bickham, who's the VP of Marketing at Birdeye. So Travis, why don't you take us through the presentation and we'll save some room for Q&A at the end.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Charles. I am very excited to be here with you today. Since we don't have video on, in case anyone was curious, so I look like when I've had a haircut. not so much in the past 12 months, but I think we have a really exciting topic today. What I want to do is first orient us around, what we're going to be covering. And for starters, what Birdeye does is we focus on this world of experience marketing that we're going to dive into. And so what that means is we get the opportunity to help 60,000 businesses around the country optimize being found by prospects and customers through listings, pages, reviews, essentially showing up where the conversation's happening, being found and chosen next through interacting with those customers and really giving them the experience they want, and then ultimately being the best business by judging customer feedback, triaging any issues, seeing what competitors are doing, and putting all of that together in one flywheel. And so while in the past, businesses were really able to control experiences by, traditional advertising channels, things like billboards, direct mail, even the early days of online search, that started to go away. You think of 2007 as really a tipping point. We all started walking around with computers in our pockets, and those computers were networked to other computers, and we were networked to each other. And what this did is it started to shift the conversation. So instead of brands controlling experiences, we moved to a world where experiences started controlling brands. And so whether customers are having those conversations on review sites, through referrals with each other, through social networks, ultimately as marketers, we've had to really change the paradigm we operate under. Now it's no longer enough to think in terms of a big broad funnel that we're going to put advertising dollars in the top of and get a certain amount of revenue at the bottom. Instead, it's about this living, breathing world of experience marketing, where ultimately what we're trying to do is market existing experiences that customers have had to new customers to get them to come in, interact with our brand, and then share those experiences, creating that flywheel we looked at on the last slide. And so ultimately for marketers, what this has meant is the CMO has had to become the CXO, the Chief Experience Officer. And that's because not only are we marketing experiences, we're actually also charged with creating them. So understanding, physically and digitally, what's happening to customers as they interact with our brand and how we can improve that. So therefore, we can become a well-oiled marketing engine. So if customers don't trust advertisements, what do they trust? Well, 92% of customers are consulting online reviews before making a purchase decision. I mean, case in point, myself, whether it's grabbing food or I just moved, I had to order a new washer dryer, right? All of my searches are starting with a review. And what do I do after I see a review? I validate that, right? I'll, ask someone like my good friend here, Charles, and say, hey, Charles, what do you like, right? What are you using? And I'm basing my decisions on that. And it's actually a little scary for a marketer because at no point have I interacted through an official channel. And so that conversation is very difficult to monitor and very difficult to control unless you're engaging in experience marketing, right? We talk a lot about this experience gap too. And this is a disconcerting fact whereby 80% of businesses think that they're delivering superior customer experience, but only 8% of customers agree. So it's not even enough to, push those experiences out to future customers. You actually also need to be improving them too, so you can have both sides of that coin. So where do we start here? I like to point to the two biggest channels as reviews and referrals, and they're really synergistic. So these two feed off each other. And there are a lot of tactics and techniques we can talk about from a marketing campaign perspective and a technology perspective to improve both of these simultaneously. Step one is reviews, right? The thing about reviews is we've all been trained to think either only really happy customers or really angry customers write them. So how am I supposed to deal with this as a business? Well, you want to get in front of more of the really happy ones, right? And so I think that this is where it ties into understanding the experiences you're delivering. So if someone comes into your business or interacts with your brand in any way, and you can use something as simple as a survey to understand how their experience was, if they're 5 out of 5, I want to go ahead and follow on that with a review request. So I can make sure I'm getting more of my happy customers participating in the conversation. Reviews are also excellent for SEO, right? We talk about SEO as a global game with a local footprint. It all starts from that review. And then of course, if someone is giving you that great review, ask them for a referral right then and there. The statistics we see across 60,000 businesses show that this is extremely effective. If you can do the three-legged stool of a great experience, ask someone to talk about it, and then ask someone to refer based on that great review and that great experience. And then you've not only retained a customer, you've amplified their voice and potentially created new customers out of that. So that's a fairly rudimentary overview, but this is ground zero for getting into the world of experience marketing.
Hey, Travis, just quick interjection. Is the process or the practice of requesting reviews, how common is that? I mean, or excuse me, referrals. Or yeah, I guess maybe you can answer for both, but for referrals, how commonly are those referrals requested by companies, or is that an unutilized practice?
Well, that's a great question, Charles. I think that it's a concept, most people are trying in some form, but most people are doing it wrong, just to be totally frank. So where we see referrals come into play a lot are things like loyalty programs, right? And the problem with that is they're just inherently programmatic, right? You're saying, come back time and time again, you'll accrue points, whatever it is, and you'll then get a discount. There's no emotion in that. There's no brand advocacy. And I'm not saying that loyalty programs don't have their place somewhere, but what I see the best brands and the people dominating the world of experience marketing doing is being very campaign based and being very personalized in how they're asking for referrals. So at Birdeye, we use something called the experience score. And what that does is it's kind of a living, breathing customer health score across your entire database, everyone you've ever done business with. So that replaces traditional NPS, which is kind of fragmented, really more around kind of like a once a quarter pulse survey type thing. And what we see our best customers doing is taking that real-time data, and anytime someone gets, let's say, above an 8, 9, 10 on the experience score, send a referral campaign directly there. And so instead of thinking in terms of a one-size-fits-all loyalty program, you're actually giving your best opportunities to your best customers right there in real time. So we've got actually some pretty interesting case studies on this on our website. I see this being done at the enterprise end quite a bit, but it's also trickling down really through the whole market. And this is one of the advantages of experience marketing is, you don't need the most sophisticated strategy in the world to start generating revenue out of something like this. It's as simple as knowing who your best customers are and asking them to share.
Great.
Yeah, and here's the other thing, Charles, is the internet obviously is how we search, how we do business now. And that's given people really an open door to authenticity. It's very simple for a customer to go out and get a very unfiltered, unbiased view of what others are saying about your brand. And so for me as a marketer, it's absolutely essential to, I don't want to say control that conversation, but certainly facilitate it and make sure all sides are being told. At sort of the dawn of time, the way we would trade and transact is we would walk a campfire over and we would, exchange some fish for some venison. Then we moved into this world of network-based transacting, whereby we were searching online and ads were able to reach us, and we would click based on those ads because we didn't know any better. And ads do obviously still have a place in the world of marketing, and we use them at Birdeye, of course. But we've entered now this third phase where that lack of authenticity from advertising has become very obvious to customers. And so now what they're trying to do is get back to that original face-to-face transaction level with someone they can trust and someone they feel is authentic. And then now the challenge for brands becomes, well, how do you do that at scale? And that's where I think reviews and referral programs run through a digital platform can start to be really, really exciting.
Great.
So let's talk a little bit about how to actually do that. I alluded to this before, but a successful experience marketing program really has three components, and that's people, processes, and tools. So I'm guessing if you're listening, to this webinar, you already have great people, right? The fact that you're tuned in and you're downloading this kind of content means you're already thinking about this sort of thing. So check, you likely have what you need on the people side. The process side is really understanding, what's working and what's not. So instead of doing things on a very ad hoc basis, how can we do those using automation, right? And this can be as simple as saying, the example before, every time someone hits an 8, I want to send them a review request. Or every time someone responds to my pulse survey after they have an interaction or a transaction with us, I want to ask them for a review. So the way we thought about things like email marketing 5-10 years ago, and we started to build these nurtures, these flows, e-commerce started to get bigger, all of that type of mentality is now coming to experience marketing. And it's really as simple as putting in automation, understanding your reporting, and seeing where it's working, right? We talk to businesses that range from tens of thousands of locations to some of our customers are very local in a single geography. But regardless of where you are in that spectrum, it's very important to understand how your different locations are performing. One, so you can get ahead of any issues, obviously, but two, so you can treat them as sort of testing grounds and see who's doing the best in this world of experience marketing and apply that across the rest of your locations, right? And you want to make this simple, right? And of course, this absolutely has to be integrated with your CRM. The last thing any team wants is a new system to work out of that doesn't talk to the old system. At Birdeye, we kind of saw this early, and we invested in creating over 1,000 integrations with different CRMs across kind of all of our key verticals. But regardless of what industry you're in or where you are on this maturity curve, you want to make sure that data is going back and forth. And then speaking of simplicity, make it simple on the customer side, right? Make it so all they have to do is click and then leave a review. And then you can go back and report on all that, understand how it's going, and then ultimately monitor review quantity and review quality.
Yeah, I think this notion of reviews as a tool for improving your operations, I mean, you've sort of touched on that, and I think it's kind of under discussed, and particularly larger companies who have some scale with the review content must, it's an amazing tool for making personnel decisions even, and floor plans for retail stores and any number of things that review content can drive a lot of decision making. Are you seeing a lot of that going on with your clients?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, on the more sophisticated end, we actually see clients in the retail space who are equipping their floor managers with an iPad or even an iPhone, and they're getting those reviews in real time. So let's say someone, posts, hey, very unfriendly reaction with the greeter up front. This guy seemed like he didn't even want to be at work today. The store manager can go and coach that behavior in real time and make sure that, that doesn't snowball out of control. So we see that. And then on the flip side, let's take an example here. We have a big client in the insurance industry in Texas, hundreds of locations. And what they do is they have real-time alerts for their entire management staff. Every time a review comes in that's flagged as, below optimal, that's going out to the entire management team, and that's going out to the local team on location, and they're reacting to that, and they're changing behaviors, and they're monitoring how those behaviors go. So it can be extremely powerful as just an unbiased source of data on what customers want and how they want to receive your service. So I think that's a great point, Charles. Okay. Well, moving on to referrals, this is a little bit more greenfield for a lot of people. Reviews, I think we've been thinking about potentially a little bit longer, but referrals are starting to become a key engine for growth and experience marketing. So collecting referrals is a lot like collecting reviews, but we do see, we're a little bit earlier on for a lot of businesses where people will even be doing this on pencil and paper, right? And we talked about loyalty programs as well. But those methods have their own problems in that it's difficult to keep track of referrals over time. It can be hard to understand how your incentives are working or how much that's costing your business. So that's why we typically recommend handling referrals in the exact same way you handle reviews. Using automation to send out that request the same way you would a review. And then instead of linking to that review site, you're just providing a referral opportunity. So we have some customers that choose to send these out automatically, typically, waiting until right after a very positive experience, or even putting them on a cadence that's, a couple of days after they interact with your brand. But ultimately, it's going to have to make sense for who your customers are and how they work with your business. So a dentist might, have a totally different approach than a large retail provider. And again, reporting is key here. The way to make a referrals program more effective is to keep this digital, make sure you can monitor it. It doesn't have to be the most complex thing in the world. Ultimately what you're trying to do is just build a flywheel that is great feedback turned into more customers, turned into more revenue, rinse and repeat. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel here. I think this is actually very straightforward to implement. And some of the businesses that we've done this with are not ones you would think of as extremely digitally enabled off the bat. But of course, COVID changed that. There is no more such thing as a digital holdout, especially in local business. Everyone is digital now. And so I would also say, as you embrace that journey, experiment with different incentives. Think about even things like store credit, right? If you have a recurring relationship with a customer, that can be a really powerful way to, one, incentivize a review to get another customer, but then two, keep that original customer coming back in. And so the last thing we want is a one-time relationship. Obviously, we want to widen and deepen that relationship and that customer delight over the entire lifetime of the relationship. And that's really the foundation of experience marketing. And some businesses honestly are able to do this with almost no incentive, just because the experience was so good that people like to talk about it and they like to share it.
So a little more on incentives. I'm always curious about this. I always have the cliche stuck in my head of the $5 Starbucks gift card. And
sure.
So I'm always curious, if there's a kind of a standard or a conventional wisdom, at least, of what are best practices around incentives, what generally works or what generally does not work. I realize it's very vertically dependent, I suppose, but I wonder if you have.
Sure, but it's a great question though. And I think where I would go with that, if I was consulting a customer, is I would think about, the level of value or personalization being kind of the two axes you can really move along. So if you're a bigger ticket item business, let's say property management or real estate, you typically don't interact with those customers on a daily or a weekly basis. And so I see things like people remembering to, automate the sending of flowers on the anniversary of a move-in or breaking ground on a new site. And this kind of thing, one, feels very thoughtful, but also very personalized. And it is fairly simple to do at scale. So that's one way to handle it. And then if you're someone who operates on a much higher frequency and a much higher transaction volume, then I think you index to value. And so just had a really great conversation with a woman named Amy Dickey, who runs marketing at the Saxton Group, large restaurant group in the Midwest. And what they started doing is they included a coupon for free delivery. So let's say you're ordering through them off DoorDash. Instead, they'll give you a coupon where you can have it delivered directly to the restaurant. And so the customer sees that as a really great value because they're cutting out the middleman. They no longer have to pay for this delivery service. And also for the restaurant, they're obviously taking more of that cut. And they've rolled that out across 80 locations. And so I think either present better value to the customer or show them that you value them by increased personalization. But once again, testing, see what works, see what gets good responses, and don't be afraid to try new things here. It's kind of an opportunity to have fun, actually.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, and since you kind of asked for some examples, talk about Superior Storage. They are a Birdeye customer, 16 locations, very focused on reviews and referrals. And their journey basically ended up with them figuring out that their best cadence was to send an automated referral request to their biggest fans, who of course they're identifying through reviews, exactly 2 weeks after move-in. And the reason 2 weeks ended up being a sweet spot for them is if you think about people moving, and I just went through a move myself, so I totally get it. The day you move in, even 3 days, 7 days later, you're still waiting on things to be delivered. You're stressed out because there's boxes everywhere. You don't have your Wi-Fi set up, whatever it is, it's just not optimal timing. And so through testing, they figured out 2 weeks was the sweet spot where they were still top of mind for customers, but also those customers just had a chance to settle in and reflect on a really positive experience because of course they're great at customer experience because they use Birdeye. And so after just 1 month of doing this, Superior Storage got 26 customers who shared their info with family and friends. This resulted in new deals. And the cool part to me is someone who really likes the technology and the data side is all this was tracked. And so it wasn't just, someone coming into one of their locations and saying, hey, my friend Bob referred me. They actually could see that referral from Bob. They were running those digital campaigns and they were driving business in real time through experience. And so that goes back to everything we've been talking about this whole time about you can't just advertise to people anymore. You need your customers to do that advertising for you. And so bringing it all together, what does a winning experience marketing platform look like? We touched on the CRM piece. Your systems absolutely need to talk to each other. So that's one of the first things I would look for. If I was shopping, I would also look for that two-sided coin of reviews and referrals. I mean, really anything is greenfield if you're not doing it. So I fully support, starting with one if you're at zero, but you're going to see so much more value if you take on both of these, because it goes back to that flywheel of being found, being chosen, and then being the best business you can be to keep that going. And then of course, on the reporting side, the only way to get better, and the basis of experience marketing, of course, is improving experiences, is through comprehensive reporting. And so if you're having trouble with either of these programs or you're struggling to get it off the ground, I would say there's a ton of great resources out in the market. And ultimately, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, sort of like we talked about. You just really need to put in the foundations and then test, optimize, and scale. With Birdeye, this is of course automated, and so that makes it much easier. And putting all of your information on one platform enables your different campaigns to talk to each other. Your different people, if they're running these programs separately, are able to see exactly what the other one's seeing. And you're ultimately able to turn this into revenue much faster. So a few takeaways here to leave you with before we get to the Q&A. And Charles, definitely fire away if you have anything on your end. But to me, what I hope everyone walks out of this with is that the world of marketing is very different now. And experience marketing is absolutely crucial to customer acquisition. And customer acquisition is, of course, directly tied to revenue and growth in the business. And in the environment that we're in right now, where we've seen some industries rapidly expanding, others rapidly shrinking, there really isn't a discussion around what's the right time to do this. The time is yesterday. And if you haven't done it yet, I really, really encourage you to take a look at this today, because this is how customers are buying. And this is how businesses are either succeeding or failing. There's a million examples we can share, and I'd be happy to do so if it comes up in the Q&A. But ultimately, to adapt, businesses are going to need the tools that make this automated, and the process of spreading word of mouth, is still the same as it has been since the very, very beginning, but now has to be done at scale. And so I hope this was helpful to everyone. It certainly has been exciting for me over the past year to watch some customers, leverage this, grow and take market share, and really, basically win the ground war with their competitors. And so I do hope everyone's thinking about this, and we're happy to answer any questions.
All right, great. Thank you, Travis. So we have a few questions rolling in, and I'm going to just sort of sift through them and ask away. So let me start with this one. And it gets to sort of the value of a referred customer versus a customer who comes in through some other channel. So have you ever been able to measure a difference, say, in the lifetime value of a referred customer versus a customer that comes in, say, brought in through advertising or whatever other channel?
Right. Yeah, it's typically about 5 times greater, both in terms of the win rate. If someone comes in through advertising, they're usually looking at a minimum of 3 competitors before they make that decision. If someone's referred in, it's often your game to lose. And so we see about a 5 times higher close rate on that. And then over time, you do have a built-in relationship with that customer that was referred in. And that customer tends to be much stickier and also tends to be more comfortable making larger ticket purchases. And so they're willing to give you their biggest and their best business, and they're willing to come back time and time again, so long as they continue to have a positive experience.
What about the cost of acquiring that customer? So it converts higher, has a higher lifetime value, but is also the cost of acquiring that customer higher, lower?
Well, significantly lower, right? It's going to depend on your business and your industry, but you think about an advertisement, that could be anything from a $100,000 billboard divided by how many customers it drives to something as simple as an ad on Google that might cost you $100 for someone to fill out that form. So whatever that is for you, trade that cost of acquisition versus free, because you're already focused on servicing your existing customers, delighting them, providing great experiences. And so all you're layering on top of that work that you're doing already is just a simple ask. And you pay for the software, of course, but after that, it's, unlimited use, and sky's the limit. You could send a referral request to 7 billion people on planet Earth if you had them all in your database, and it would still be the same cost. And so the unit economics of referrals are just astounding compared to advertising.
Yeah, this is kind of an SEO-ish question. So there's been a lot of research that ratings-only reviews have much less value than written reviews. In other words, just 5 stars versus 5 stars plus some narrative. Do you have a point of view on this, and how do you encourage reviewers to write sufficiently detailed reviews?
I do definitely have a point of view on this. So in marketing, we talk a lot about this idea that story is strategy. And I think that applies to reviews as well. So that context that comes from a review, one can answer very specific questions, right? How I, look in review sites is I'll go to the search bar, and let's say I'm really thinking about getting the quesadilla. I'm going to search quesadilla versus just reading all the food. And so you have the ability to control much more context of what your customers are seeing and give them a much richer experience. So I definitely advocate for encouraging the written review versus just the rated review. And usually you can use pretty basic nudges in order to get that. So if you're asking for a review, it could be something as simple as including, one sentence in your ask that says, help out others, writing about your experience, makes it much easier for them to choose. Right? That's bad marketing. You could do better copy, I'm sure, but just including that little nudge, people tend to react very well to that from what I've seen. And also, following up, if you see a great review, depending on the volume you're dealing with, and it's 5 stars but no writing, respond directly and say, we're so happy that you've had this amazing experience. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, tell us more. Yeah, because I know Google, I forgot what they called it again. It wrote a blog about it a while back where they were experimenting with something where there's like a series of attributes that you can click on, and it almost sort of like writes itself through,
Yeah,
you know, responsive, clean, friendly, things like that. Have you ever
exactly.
experimented with models like that where you're actually sort of almost like letting them push button write a review?
That's not something that I lean so much into on the review creation side, because
Yeah,
I'm personally a massive advocate of, authenticity and that direct
sure.
connection. But on the review response side, I think that can be really powerful, because as you
Yeah.
start to run a review program, you're going to get a lot of reviews, right? Maybe going from a dozen to hundreds. And so
Hmm.
responding to those, because that's very important too, to close that loop with the customer. You want to be able to quickly kind of choose a path there. And so exactly what you just said, Charles. I'm delighted that you had such a good experience with the delivery. We look forward to seeing you again. You can use that for every delivery and customize a little bit of it, and that's not disingenuous to me at all. And so I
Right.
see a lot of medium to large customers doing that.
Okay. Couple more real quick here. One is kind of interesting. Have you experimented with reviews in multimedia formats like video, audio, et cetera? Where's your thinking around that? And is there anything happening in that respect with reviews?
I think that's very exciting.
Hmm.
The average human now has an attention span of 6 seconds, which is 2 seconds less than a
That
goldfish.
long? Okay.
Yeah, and so
Mhm.
anything we can do to compete for attention, because remember, you're not just competing with your brick and mortar competitors, you're competing with Netflix, right? People have a
Right.
million things they could be doing, and so video can be a really powerful way to capture attention and deliver a lot of information in a short period of time. Like for me, I look at YouTube when I need to fix something. I don't read the article, and I think that's true across any communication channel. So the more you can bring in multimedia to your reviews program, the better. Also referrals, send people a cool video, and then they're much more likely to respond.
Cool, cool. And the last question is sort of back to what you said at the beginning, which is notion of the chief experience officer. I guess a little more on, I realize that may be a little bit of rhetoric, but how does that job really different from a CMO? Like, what does a CXO do day to day that's different
Yep,
than a CMO?
sure. So I think there's a few macro trends here, right? One is that customers are now connected, walking around with that phone in their pocket.
Hmm.
And so as a marketer, you're no longer just thinking in terms of their interactions with your marketing, right? Your emails, your advertisements, your billboards. You have to think about their interactions with every aspect of your business. And so that typically extends into the physical, right? What are they saying when they come into your establishment? What are they experiencing from a staff standpoint? And if a marketer is responsible for acquisition, brand reputation, and customer voice, which they have been in recent memory, then you're going to need to deal with that physical experience too. So that's one. Two is acquisition channels and actually acquiring those leads have moved to totally different spheres of conversation. And so as a marketer, it's no longer about what you can control, what you can pay for. It's about riding the wave of what your customers are saying about you. And so that forces you much more into this world of experience. So I see these duties, from what I can tell, and in my own world as well, as really shifting to covering the in-store experience, whether that be layout, hiring, staffing, uniforms, like anything you can think of is now running through a marketing department at well-run businesses, to
Hmm.
understanding that experience through surveys, through ticketing, through competitive insights and benchmarking, and being the master of that data and that technology stack, so you can go back and give the team on the ground the right information to create better experiences. And then of course the traditional marketing duties around growing the brand and getting more revenue in the door. So it's a brave new world, but I think it's exciting, and it's an opportunity for marketers to continue to own their seat at the table and drive value for their business.
Great, cool. Okay, I think that's all we have. So those are a good interaction. Thanks for everyone for joining us today, and thanks, Travis. Great session. Lizzie, do you want to take us out?
Sure. Well, thank you again, Travis and Charles. Like you said, great questions and discussion. And I just want to thank Birdeye so much for putting together the webinar for us. Just a few more items from Localogy before we end today's webinar. If your question was not answered during the Q&A, we will have someone follow up with answers to your questions. You will be able to view today's broadcast along with previous webinars on our website, localogy.com. Just navigate to Research and Resources and drop down to Webinars. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please be sure to visit localogy.com and subscribe for updates to be the first to know about future webinars. I hope everyone has a great day.